So first I'd like to introduce you to Tony Gibson before handing over, well, to the recorded version of what Tony prepared earlier. Tony will be with us to answer Q&A at the end, but I'm not sure whether Tony will have full access to the Q&A tool as he's going, so I'll field questions to Tony at that point in the same way that I have done with Ivan just now. Okay, so to introduce Tony then. Tony's career in the nuclear industry spans more than 30 years, covering program and project work from studies, R&D and concept design through to site implementation, plant handover and asset management. He started out as a mechanical apprentice and has held roles related to engineering design, conventional safety, nuclear safety, project management and site management. Tony currently works at Sellafield Limited, and he has a dual role as the Centre of Expertise leader for requirements management, as well as the deputy head for project systems engineering management. He's involved in significant areas of enterprise transformation programs and is currently undertaking a doctorate in business administration at the Liverpool Business School. In professional bodies, Tony is the chair of the Nuclear Institute Membership Committee and sits on the Engineering Council's Board of Trustees. He's been instrumental in driving forward systems thinking into transformation at Sellafield Limited and more broadly in the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. Tony is a STEM ambassador and a regular judge at Big Bang Northwest. So another leading light in systems engineering, making a difference in many areas. It's my pleasure to hand over then to Tony Gibson, or pre-recorded version of Tony, for this next presentation.
Thanks. It's good to be here, even if it is slightly even more virtual than the rest of us. I think I've got to listen to myself now for half an hour, so however you feel about the presentation, I'll probably be cringing in the background. But I'll hand this over to virtual Tony, and I'll pick up at the end on questions. Thank you very much.
The challenges of introducing contemporary systems engineering into a major nuclear project delivery organisation, by Tony Gibson. Nuclear engineering has been around for only 80 years. That may sound like a long time, but compare it to some of the other engineering areas. Mechanical engineering, the 18th century, or you could go back to the invention of the wheel, 3,500 years before Christ. Civil engineering again has been around thousands of years. Look at the pyramids starting around 2500 BC. Process or chemical engineering was the late 19th century, but again you could challenge this and look back to the start of the Iron Age and ore extraction around 1200 BC. Electrical engineering was the late 19th century. Nuclear, only 80 years old, from Walton and Cockcroft and Hahn and Strassman atom smashing in the lab, to all of the work around producing the bomb and everything since then. Systems engineering has been a similar timescale, from the early days at Bell Telephone Laboratories to the explosion of innovation initiated by war. So you'd think the new kids on the block should be comfortable bedfellows, right? Nuclear spawned a whole era of different products coming onto the market, trying to make use of the wondrous properties of radioactivity. Anything from dyes and polishes to radium water to treat every ailment under the sun. Even chocolate was on the table. Luminous dials on clocks and watches and even radioactive toothpaste to give you that special smile. Ultimately, though, the industry has been dominated by warfare, with even power being a thinly disguised front to harvest weapons materials via Magnox reactors. It's no coincidence that all the superpowers ran these large and inefficient systems, Magnox powering the Cold War and the arms race. So an industry soaked in secrecy and security in equal measures was bound to drive a self-sufficient approach and suspicion of outside influences. On top of this, it's an industry that has a weighty chip on its shoulder, claiming not to have a level playing field. Other industries and other disasters were not treated with the same sensationalism. Looking at Bhopal and other major disasters and major losses of life. The thing for nuclear was a lack of general understanding of what it actually was. This made it ripe for media exploitation, sensational headlines and stories, whether that be coming from the big budget Hollywood shows and films, or even down to cartoons like The Simpsons. Tragically, weight to the myths and a sobering reality was thrust onto the world's headlines in 1986 with the Chernobyl disaster. It's in this context that we come to Sellafield, the world's most complex nuclear site, covering all aspects of the nuclear fuel cycle. £2 billion of taxpayers' money is deployed annually in what is a closure programme spanning over a century. Careful planning of future waste management and decommissioning was in short supply at the height of the Cold War. The focus was firmly on supporting the activities of the Ministry of Defence and our NATO allies. This has resulted in complex and one-of-a-kind challenges across multiple programmes dealing with ageing infrastructure and confined real estate. A number of high-profile programme and project failures, worthy in themselves of individual systems thinking case studies, brought deep scrutiny on the delivery of the Sellafield mission. The Nuclear Decommissioning Authority's Programme and Project Review Group issued a report in 2012 looking at how engineering supported major projects on the Sellafield site. It was clear from the report they saw virtually no understanding of systems engineering or requirements management, and certainly no formal expertise in it at Sellafield. This is troubling when you think of the amount of money that was being spent from the Treasury and taxpayers' coffers. An improvement programme was initiated, and after a stalling start, a period of intense assessment was undertaken. In-flight projects, assurance data, programme arrangements, training processes and support systems were all reviewed. A group of individuals started to look at what was really behind some of the problems that we were facing. Initially targeted at requirements management, as this was flagged by the PPRG report, the shortfalls covered a lack of clarity on strategic alignment and being able to trace back to the mission. Functional specifications not fully bound or validated, leaving wants and stakeholder preferences in there rather than defined business needs. Confusion over the differences in application of validation and verification. V&V plans were produced, but no one was truly clear on what was trying to be achieved. Inconsistent or absent requirements management practice in configuration control. No one was really matching back to demonstrate truly that those requirements were being met and how they were being controlled and flowed down through the project and on through the project lifecycle. There was a significant constraint in terms of access to requirements management expertise and supporting systems, particularly around IT and traceability, etc. Although this was focusing on the requirements management aspects, it was clear that the issues unearthed were indicative of an organisation that had immature project systems engineering practice and experience. Coherent systems thinking was broadly absent. The issues could all be grouped under three key themes: alignment of principles, organisational alignment, information management and configuration control. Under the improvement initiatives, the Requirements Management Centre of Expertise and the Project Systems Engineering Management Capability Groups look to align with external expertise and best practice. Studying the INCOSE Systems Engineering Handbook and gain formal qualifications and professional recognition. This was added to the already qualified APM body of knowledge and project professionals. Existing equivalent approaches in project and program management added in from the APM body of knowledge meant that alignment of principles could be finally looked at. This allowed targeting improvements to processes, mapping across to the key tenets of the selected approaches. From this, key stakeholders were identified for engagement, enabling early influencing of position and maximising support, whilst addressing any concerns that they were raising early in the processes. A strong defence against doing the same old things via demonstration of alignment to principles, leveraging external best practice, and being able to demonstrate to external stakeholders, such as regulators and government bodies, that the approaches being taken were not a result of purely internal thinking, but adopting sound principles that had been tried and tested across numerous sectors, enterprise models and project types across the globe. Although the nuclear sector has its own unique challenges, systems thinking has proven time and again to be fundamental to successful enterprise transformation programs. There was still, and there still are, strong functional groups evident within the enterprise. Grown from the finest traditions of an industrial superpower, the engineering capabilities that were in place to support project delivery were based on the traditional approaches of single discipline chief engineers presiding over specialist centres of expertise. These groups were closely aligned to their respective professional engineering institutes, influencing how projects were structured by embedding discipline-specific responsible engineers as leaders into the integrated project teams, who in turn built a discipline-specific team to deliver the project scope. More modern approaches have found it challenging to integrate into this well-established structure, but not impossible. Approaches have changed significantly over the last 2 decades, but what of systems thinking? The role of project engineering manager was formally recognised, but was the only engineering role truly aligned to the systems engineering principle of holistic oversight and delivery of the entire systems requirement set. There was a degree of suspicion encountered when engaging the traditional groups. An integrated, holistic approach was seen as somehow diluting the value and need for discipline-specific groups, and the impression from outside the projects that things worked fine as they were. This view was softened, and the move towards formal integration was assisted by INCOSE UK Engagements, a joint working group with the APM looking towards systems thinking and a resulting SIG. The IMechE had seminars and offers training on systems engineering. It was becoming obvious that to move forward in 21st century engineering, an integrated holistic approach was critical to being successful. When engaging the project teams themselves, it was found that a project structure existed that was not captured by the enterprise processes or by formal reporting or organizational role definitions. The majority of projects had introduced layers below the project engineering managers, where the extensive duties of the system engineer, integrating asset performance, conventional safety, nuclear safety, radiological safety, environmental performance, security, and nuclear safeguards was fundamental. These area engineering managers and the project systems engineers were integrating the design and engineering packages on the projects and interfacing with other capabilities, such as commissioning teams and ops and maintenance personnel, who were already aligned to a systemic breakdown of the asset. The challenge these individuals faced was that they worked around processes rather than being enabled by them. They had no formally recognised career path or professional development plan. They had no formal home from which to gain support, suitable training and share learning from experience. These were not additional resources hidden on a project, but were discipline engineers who adopted the systems engineering role as the dominant discipline on a given asset area or system. Recognising this duality of roles took some time for those not directly engaged on a project, but eventually roles were recognised, language rationalised, so that all projects had common nomenclature, and the project systems engineering management capability identified as their home. In parallel to all these activities, the requirements management COE had been gradually and carefully grown, sweeping themselves en route. The overall PSEM capability, including value management centre of expertise, was also grown and become more formalised. Traction and confidence followed engagements across the enterprise, with the focus shifting to the higher value areas of strategy and programme, addressing problems before they embedded and ensuring new endeavours launched on firm foundations. Challenges were encountered, process improvement inertia, contrary behaviours in groups and individuals who had nowhere to hide once clarity was achieved, antiquated support systems impacting the ability to roll out support tools. The message and the people engaged were succeeding in pushing the rock up the mountain, but it took continuous effort, persistence, and resilience. Whilst engaging with live projects, the requirements management COE was exposed to a wide range of approaches to the management of information and configuration control. In the context of requirements management, broader SE, the proverbial back of a fag packet was actually an improvement in some areas, where work commenced in lieu of stakeholder need definition. Word was the most widespread tool, with data stored in a traditional manner, with no automation of information management, presenting high levels of contradictory or outdated information, and none but the most perfunctory assessment of traceability in the golden threads. Some use of Excel and Visio that at least had links and demonstrable relationships was evident, but again, this was only at the most perfunctory levels. The more complex proprietary tools felt a little like handing the keys of a Ferrari to a stagecoach driver. The gaping trap of buying in experts to fly the software resulted in wildly varying levels of success, with few within SL qualified to judge one way or the other. No one appeared satisfied with that their approach was optimal, with proponents of any given approach usually defending it having been influenced by a poor experience with another philosophy. The enterprise is still on the journey to the most appropriate system to support a wider common data environment approach. The real win was in terms of planning and approaches. Requirements management plans and system engineering management plans were non-existent, but improvements to execution planning, estimating and project organisation has resulted in use of both, providing an assurable framework within which any approach can be deployed given their inherent constraints to satisfy delivery of the systems engineering need. The Requirements Management COE reviewed the use of information technology both within and without the enterprise with an eye to a true systems engineering future and generated a detailed user requirement specification for the provision of an appropriate IT platform. The key aspects included ensuring a single source of the truth, one place for each piece of data that everybody looked towards, scope definition via product breakdown structures and work breakdown structures, interlinked and built upon the requirements that were being defined, user accessible, facilitating day-to-day use by the people working on the projects, ensuring that the engineers were capturing what was required, not using somebody sat in the corner who was just brought in to enter data. Live information access, meaning everybody could see what was happening on the project at any given moment. Robust configuration, control of users' access rights and workflow, so that people didn't have to read and follow a process and make sure it was embedded. The system will drive those behaviors. A visible golden thread, given the traceable path for all requirements all the way down from the enterprise strategy. Robust project planning, making sure all key activities were captured, validation, verification, etc., and the relationships between them. Live assurance, in parallel with project delivery in real time, not stopping, producing documents, performing an assurance event, and then trying to restart with a plethora of actions on the table. Capturing design intent against each product level, showing what the product at that stage has to do to meet all of those diverse needs that are evident on a nuclear plant. So, where are we up to now? We have a cohort of engineering leaders studying the INCOSE syllabus. They're actively engaging and enjoying the journey via group learning and active learning sets, building up the expertise within the business and a community of practice. The enterprise management system is being updated to embed systems thinking as a fundamental spine across functional areas, not just one area. This will tie all of the project delivery, program definition, study activities together in a true enterprising systems engineering approach. Directors stating systems engineering is vital to delivering the enterprise transformation plan, moving the business firmly towards future delivery in support of a reinvigorated sector. You can't move forward without this senior sponsorship. Major procurement mechanisms have development of collaborative systems engineering as a key tenet. SEMPs are in place on all new projects. We've taken it seriously in terms of systems thinking, systems engineering, and this is the way to deliver projects in the 21st century. IT systems are in a detailed definition stage in support of a combined data environment, and trials are ongoing for candidate support systems to further improve delivery of the systems engineering frameworks we have in place. The system's lifecycle has been mapped onto the enterprise gated process, giving clarity across the breadth of the enterprise, what they really should be doing and considering at all of the stages as they move forward. The Project Systems Engineering Management Handbook gives accessible guidance on what all actors should be doing and expecting of others. Signposting help, coaching, training, best practice, etc. People understand and believe in what the RM, COE and PSEM capability are trying to achieve. They believe it is needed and believe it will help them successfully deliver. Updated processes also now match these expectations and make it far more comfortable for them to do the right thing, rather than showing they're blindly complying with outdated processes. There is an ever-growing community of practice, driving change across broad areas of the business. Still, a long way to go, but the journey now feels like a movement rather than the personal quest of a select few. So, what key takeaways can we take from this? A key for me is don't underestimate the cultural context of change in your environment. Yes, nuclear is quite a unique set of circumstances given its history and where it's grown from, but everyone's area will have a cultural context. If you don't understand that, if you don't address it, if you don't put measures in place to counter it, change is unlikely to happen. Promote the synergies between traditional and modern approaches. This isn't doing away with the old in favour of the new. We shouldn't be throwing out the baby and the bathwater. There are still highly valued aspects of traditional approaches that we cannot deliver projects without, and it's key to understand that new approaches enhance and improve on these, not replace them. Understands what is possible within the constraints placed upon you. Shoot for the stars and hope to get to the moon is something one of my colleagues says. This may sound like settling, but you have to understand in the reality of modern business what is achievable and what isn't. There's no point within SL moving towards training, upgrading IT and software for 10,000 people all in one go. We have to eat the elephant, winning battles as we go along and making sure that we can achieve realistic goals. Ensure senior buy-in, yes, that's a must, but we also have to make sure that the influential people have bought in as well. We've seen changes across many sectors, many business globally fail, even with the buy-in of executives and senior people, because those key influencers within the business weren't on board with that change. So it's not just a case of the director says so, your senior managers and the other layers that permeate organizations need to be on board with changes before charging ahead. Cement the win, ensure the change is embedded and take the next steps. There's no point thinking, I've done it, we've got there, it's all sorted, moving on to the next challenge, only to turn around and see the whole stack of cards is collapsed. You've got to make sure that change is totally embedded and people have it as a way of working. If it doesn't suit people and it gives them more things to do and gives them no benefits, you will not cement the win. It has to be a benefit to people. That is critical. And then we can move on to the next step with the ultimate goal of getting to where we need to be. It hasn't been easy, but it is vital if we are to be successful within the 21st century industry adopting a systems engineering approach. Deployment of the knowledge and techniques espoused by systems engineering will ensure we continue to make a valuable contribution to our industries, for those funding our endeavours, and more importantly, for those relying on us to keep them safe and secure. Hopefully, you're not looking like the people in the picture, and any questions can come forward now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the pre-recorded version of Tony's presentation. I'm hoping Tony live and via mobile rather than via the intended connection is able to answer some questions for us now. How did that sound to you then, Tony? Good to me.
It was painful, to be honest. Sounded far more scouse than I thought I was, and it was hopefully not too bad for everybody else.
Oh, I'm sure from my perspective, I'm sure everyone else listening is perfectly good. Of course, it's different having a pre-recording than live, but very insightful. Thank you. And from the questions I've been seeing coming through and the comments on the chat, I think it's gone down very well. I'd like to turn attention, if I may, Tony, to a question posed by at least a couple of those who've submitted questions on the tool. Keith Collier and Alex Hazel are both asking about, was there a key turning point, a moment when the sort of dynamics shifted from that kind of lone crusade to an enterprise acceptance that this was the way?
I'd love to say there was, that I could sort of pick a nugget and point people towards that as an approach that they could pursue. But to be honest, it took a lot of continued effort and engagement with different projects, programs, portfolio areas. And as the message got out there, that even as we sat down with people, they were a bit dubious, and do we really have to do this? Do we all have to be together and understand this and discuss it? Can't we just get on and deliver? By the end of those engagements, people were surprised how much they got from it, not just from the approach, but appreciating all the holistic aspects of the challenge. And then those people would speak to their peers, their line management, and say, you should be looking at this and thinking about it. And it really spread quite organically at first. And that was the hard work that we had to put in place, because one of the challenges you have is if you go straight for senior managers and get that sponsorship, which is vital, we do tend to have quite a quick turnover in terms of senior managers and changes in roles, etc. So we got challenges from getting people on board and feeling like we had a real piece of momentum with that sponsor for them to disappear and then have to convince somebody else. So it really was sort of a grassroots up movement that took a lot of hard work to foster. But we've got to the point now where there's good penetration throughout the organisation.
Yeah. So it takes a long time then to achieve the overall effect, and I think that's the key observation here. It's been a 20+ year campaign for some to get the enterprise to the stage that it's at now.
Yeah, it's got, especially as you said in the introductions, the comparison between the two presentations, the greenfield and the brownfield. It truly was a virtually brown field for us, challenging those deeply embedded approaches and the stovepipe functional approaches to how we delivered work. And we always did it well in the past. It must be some other problem that we've got. So it's really putting in the hard miles, but you get the benefits eventually.
Okay, thank you. There's another question I spotted from Ian Gibson, who are newly standing up as president. he's asked about civil engineering and REBA versus systems engineering, and whether that created any clashes in approach that were particularly difficult obstacles to work your way through, perhaps around basis of design and difference in V&V approaches between civil engineering and systems engineering. Is that something you came across?
Yeah, there was certainly, particularly in the civil area, a well-established and robust reliance on BODs and their approach being well liked and successful. And what we had to do really was looking at, as one of the points we made, of saying that the synergies between the different approaches, and not just saying, no, this is what we're going to do, black and white, follow that, that's the way to do it, to the exclusion of all others. It's making sure that you have got those liaisons and interface work and progress together about how can we maximize the benefits of both approaches and multiple approaches to get the ultimate goal and meet that business need and fulfill the mission. So different areas, not just the civil engineering aspects, but other parts of project delivery, principles, drivers from the Infrastructure and Projects Authority and government, Industry 4.0, all sorts of different approaches, initiatives. It was really trying not to clash with things, but saying, right, well, what are our synergies and how do we integrate so that we get the best out of everything? So it's really avoid the battle and make the potential foes your allies, I suppose. That's another point to learn.
Yeah, so it's a sort of fairly soft approach to addressing the enterprise needs in a coherent way. Yeah, as you say, lots of energy goes into battling over things, an awful lot less energy to finding the areas of alignment and perhaps gradually moving people's position by influencing more softly over time.
Most definitely, yeah. It's a lot easier to flow around the jagged rock than to try and move it.
And again, that's one of the reasons why in this sort of very large enterprise situation, it takes so long to achieve the ultimate goal, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll pick on one other that I think may resonate with people in different areas, but could well have come up for you here. Ruth Jesman is asking, what training did you provide to embed systems thinking principles across the business? It's perhaps reasonable to wonder whether that's an underpinning enabler for this sort of campaign.
Most definitely, and we did, and it's still available with the business on the platforms. We do awareness sessions where you can do half a day where you look at the high level principles and look at the benefits of it from a very, obviously in half a day you can't cover an awful lot, but it does introduce the principles, it contrasts them with where we are, and it reflects on some of the challenges we've had on projects and programs where they failed, where those approaches would have most definitely given us a better result ultimately. That's then backed up by a lot more detailed training and ultimately on into studying the INCOSE syllabus and the handbook and being qualified externally so that we can demonstrate to the ONR and our other regulators that, it's not just us saying that we're doing the right things. We're doing this via third parties and being qualified in baselines outside of Sellafield and outside of the nuclear sector. So there's a real range of training, mentoring and coaching that's available for people depending on how new they are to the principles of systems thinking.
Right, thank you. It looks like we've still got a little time, so I think I've found another corker actually from Derek Price, who many of us will know well. It's around whether you needed to substantiate the case for adopting systems engineering in this sort of way by looking at quantifying the benefits to the enterprise or to the various stakeholders involved in the enterprise. This quantification of the value proposition is quite a tricky thing to put across.
Yeah, it is pretty tricky, and that the approach we really took was looking at, first of all, initially using the benefit of having a stakeholder review some of the problems we were having and pointing them out to us. The fact that, you know, systems thinking was absent, requirements management was perfunctory at best. That was one aspect of it, but also using findings from assurance and governance processes, boards of inquiry, and pointing to the issues that were being raised, and then looking at trending across those issues and how we could have addressed them better. So looking at the fact that, you know, we had very poorly written functional specs that had statements and needs that couldn't be proven. So things like provide operational flexibility. I'm not aware of the SI unit in operational flexibility, but it's very difficult to prove that and verify that you've met it and certainly maximised it. So there was all sorts of data available that we could quantify where things were going wrong, that we could then reflect in terms of looking at the approaches espoused from systems engineering and map them onto how that would address some of those shortfalls. So we sort of came at it from the other perspective of saying, these are the problems we've got. How will this meet those challenges and improve the situation?
Yeah, that's interesting, because yeah, sometimes quantification focuses on either schedule delay or cost overrun. All of that great work by Eric on others. That also had some recent updates to it, which are quite fascinating. But here you're focusing more on then the frequency of assurance comments about shortfalls of particular sorts and the problems that they have caused the enterprise. So that frequency of problems being something you can do trend analysis on. Yeah, that's a very interesting way of getting at quantification of the value proposition. Right. Well, Tony, fascinating, and to actually summarize that very long journey of the enterprise in such a succinct way, I think you've done fantastically well to bring that story together and bring it to life for us all. So thank you very much for that. Very interesting. Clearly, there's a good number of questions here. Again, afterwards, Tony should be able to deal with a number of those, albeit with some IT issues today for him due to the digger outside his house. So please bear with Tony in terms of responses to your queries. I'm sure ultimately we'll manage to address many of those. And Tony, I wish you luck in getting reconnected properly to the online world. It must be quite vexing to have that sort of thing happen to you at the moment.
There we go.